Virgo, we are on the approach to the ordeal, and we've got the Knight of Pentacles as our significator for this reading here. And it's been a little while since I've done a coffee time reading. I don't know if you can already tell from my voice, but I am sick. Again, I feel like this just happened. So, apologies in advance for any coughing I'm not able to catch with the mute button, excessive muting, anything. And if I change my voice, I promise I'm not trying to seduce you. It's just my voice. My throat hurts. But we are back at it after a little bit of time away to give me some rest. And the complex that I wanted to look at with this reading, something that Virgos are known for, perfectionism. And that can manifest in a few different ways. So we'll start getting some cards and we'll get into it. But interestingly enough, I had to wait for some sirens to go by to start the recording. And I think that's very apropos for the approach to the ordeal, because both of those stages in the hero's journey are particularly difficult. So we'll start getting some cards and we'll get into it. Because the approach, that is to whatever your respective innermost sanctum is. One of the probably more popular examples, and I don't really like using these examples anymore just because of the connotations to it, but I know this story well. But Harry Potter, in the Sorcerer's Stone, when they go through all those trials at the end of like the snarly plant that they have to relax and not freak out, and then like the keys and the chessboard and all that. That's the approach to the innermost sanctum, to where the actual Sorcerer's Stone was. So, however that's manifesting in your life, it could be coming up on a big conversation, It could be a very large conflict in your life. And the Knight of Pentacles is the slowest knight in the deck. And this is the Pulp Tarot. And I really like this depiction of the Knight of Pentacles because at first glance, like, it was giving me New York vibes, like back in like the 30s, something like that, with the style here, and this car. But the way that this building goes out endlessly into the background, at second glance, it gives me like Alcatraz, like a prison or something. And, he's just smoking a cigarette, getting out of his car. So, really taking his time and being unbothered about how long this approach is taking, because the ordeal is no joke. That's a pretty significant stage, and I mean, it's called the ordeal for a reason. Good morning, kitten. Did you hear me talking? I think it was for you. So let's get the first card here. And it's funny, I've been just itching to get back to the table. I think I said this before last time I got sick. This does not happen with my day job. I do not eagerly await my return. It's this that I get irritated. Come on, let's get back with the program. I feel like I'm becoming disconnected with myself. So I'm glad to be back. And oh, that thought about flipping, but not quite. There we go. Virgo, and talking about perfectionism, that I think is a good opportunity for me to not wait for my voice to be perfect. I'm a Virgo South Node, so I definitely have those perfectionism and people pleasing things going on. So we've got the Seven of Wands here. And if you've been around for a little bit, this is my Be Still and Know That I Am God card. It's a Psalm 46:10. And this is very fitting, I think, for the approach, because it's not be still as in be passive and do nothing. It's like be still as in surrender, trust the process, faith of a mustard seed, and or faith the size of a mustard seed. Excuse me. This is the first real test of the mute button on that newer microphone. But surrendering to the process, to the approach. And I mean, furthermore, looking deeper into that complex, it helps you work through perfectionism. Even if it feels sometimes like death, like not being able to, control everything and having to just go with the flow, it can cause some really serious anxiety. Um, the candle seems to agree with me. And there's definitely, when you're working through those perfectionism and those people pleaser wounds for whatever reason, whether it's South Node, childhood issues, what have you, they're really, really hard. Like to not anticipate trouble, because that's where a lot of my perfectionism wounds came from, was me trying to anticipate strife in the home. So trying to keep everything perfect and control the variables, just to like walking on eggshells to not instigate any kind of conflict with anyone in the home. So maybe on this approach, some of that could be manifesting, that maybe you're getting stuck in that perfectionism procrastination lurch of, are you not making progress on the approach because you're expecting it to be a certain way? And I don't want to diminish, extenuating circumstances and other variables that might be halting your progress. But I am totally guilty of not starting tasks because I might not be able to execute it perfectly. And a big reason for that was my upbringing, because I was expected to do things, and I'm talking about when I was a very young child, but expected to do things, not given instructions on how to do those things, or even really what the true objective was, and then getting in trouble for not doing the thing that I didn't know how to do perfectly. Really vicious cycle. Yeah, we've got the Hierophant. Um, and in reverse, that is like distorted institutional energy. And that doesn't necessarily have to be like a bigger organization, like a religious institution or government organization or so forth. It can be the structure in your home, because that is a system. Pardon me. Trying to spare you as much of my sick noises as possible. But Hierophant in reverse, Taurus energy. We just had that Taurus uh, full moon, and it just retrograded. Uranus just retrograded from Gemini back into Taurus. So that is actually a 7-year cycle that should be wrapping up with those revolutionary, rebellious energies of what truly makes us feel rooted, what makes us feel stable and secure. this coming up at this stage in the hero's journey, maybe that's become threatened. Maybe that's why you are undertaking some sort of ordeal. Yeah. Ooh, double Taurus energy. We've got the Sun in reverse, Strength in reverse, and Wheel of Fortune behind that. I'm not going to take all those, but it's interesting. Taurus, Taurus. Huh. And two significant celestial movements as well. So Empress, that's receiving. And this is, with the wheat and everything, definitely giving me Demeter vibes, Demeter, whichever way you say that. She's got her little halo of stars. So that's kind of giving me like a precursor to the star. So surrendering to the process for the approach on how to get to that inner sanctum to defend your empire, your security, what you've built, what is yours to receive. Let's get a little more detail here with the Oracle of Radiant Sun. Let's see. What else do we need to know about the approach? Oop. This kind of came out sideways. Endurance, Sun in Scorpio, and innovation, Jupiter in Aquarius. So, in motion energy, since those kind of topsy-turvied on their side. And that Uranus cycle moving between Taurus and Gemini, that is really like rocking the foundations of your life would be the theme of that. Like on a larger scale, Uranus and Gemini is, when we see that signature, it's significant revolutionary events, literally, like the American Revolution, the Civil War, World War II also was another event in that transit. So fighting for what truly makes you happy, what you really want to see in your empire. And that might be different than before, because I'm trying to think back to 2018, what the ideas, the notions I had about life. And it's very different than what I have now. I actually was going into what I thought at the time was my dream job, and it turned out to be a nightmare. It has actually completely soured me on my degree path, has made me completely intent on leaving this industry behind that I went to school for. And it's because of how I got treated there. And it's a very complicated situation. But my idea of stability and happiness is now not that, like, American dream, quote unquote, that is just force fed to us since we're little. Like this idea that you gotta get a house and you gotta have a family and you gotta have this and that, 2.5 Jack Russell Terriers and whatever. I've really come more into my own of getting a better grasp on what I really want out of life, actually going through a brutal and relentless individuation process. And even though that is of great benefit to me and my life, they still did an incredible amount of harm to me. And it's an interesting way that it's showing up here. Because in order to innovate and make significant changes in your life, the type of endurance that is required to get through that, not practical. It is impractical. This is practicality, Moon and Capricorn in reverse. But it is impractical to go against the grain like that of the cookie cutter life. You know, the 9 to 5, the what everybody views as stability. And, you know, I got one of those, like, what people would consider a good job, quote unquote. They're seeing it from the outside. You know, they're not seeing it from my perspective of, like, oh, now that I've been here for so long, this is just less bad than other jobs. It's not good. We haven't risen to the level of good, mostly because every job I've ever had has a degree of exploitation involved in it, and expected exploitation that you're just supposed to take on the chin and smile about. And I'm so fed up with that kind of garbage. But I'm glad that I can see clearly now. You know, the rain is gone, as it were. And I know it's making me unhappy, and now I'm just kind of Taurusing away, kind of trudging along of how do I plow this field, you know? How do I get there? So, how does this fit into the greater hero's journey? Because I don't want to make this about me, you know? But I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, you know? I'm not the only person on the surface of the earth that goes through stuff. So on the left here, Ordeal. How is that perfectionism impacting our approach to the inner sanctum? Because, like we talked about, the Knight of Pentacles is the slowest knight in the deck. So you could very well be frustrated with the pace that things are taking. Yeah, the Death card. Okay, and another topsy-turvy, too. So, in motion energy. And I love the, like, horror movie expressions down here. That definitely gives me like the vintage horror type stuff. So change that's in motion, it's taking a while. Huh. That could be bringing up perfectionism, like the duration of things. That kind of might generate the type of anxiety that makes you do stuff unnecessarily. Like, you know when you over edit something, like a paper or something, and like it was fine like 2 versions ago, like this paragraph that I've demolished, you know, Control Z into oblivion. Try and get back to where I was. Because that is certainly a challenge in managing the anxiety, is not to overwork it, not to oversalt your stew, not to dig up your seeds, you know, to make sure they're growing. So what else about this change? And I mean, that topsy-turvy with the death card, change, like, it's happening, it's marinating, it's cooking. It's just taking a while because, again, the slowest knight in the deck, he's having a smoke break, you know? Let him do his thing. The Magician, in reverse. Now this is giving me interference, manipulation. Because, I mean, if you put this in the context, you know, of the hero's journey, you're coming up against people. You're coming up against an adversary. Of course they'd want to stop you, you know, with, like the Harry Potter example, you know, booby traps and whatever. So someone in your vibe trying to sabotage this change, which could be for a variety of reasons. People be people in, you know, envy, jealousy, and whatnot. If you've got good things going for you and they don't know how to regulate their emotions and they're dealing with envy and whatnot, rather than working on their hobbies or reading a book or something, they might take it upon themselves to interfere with your life to make themselves feel better. It's just the way people be sometimes. They might, you know, want to possess the Empress for some reason, maintain some kind of control over the Empress. You know, that example that I brought up about my childhood and perfectionism, you know, not getting things right and whatnot. A lot of that perfectionism and the things that I was getting in trouble for were driven by a need to maintain perception, to maintain this, like, quote unquote family image, as if that matters. Like, we're just another, you know, group of Sims. You know, if you've ever played that game, it's just another house on the block. It's really, we're very small in the grand scheme of things, and certainly not influential enough to justify that sort of harshness towards a child. Not that it could even be influential enough to justify that, but I think you get where I'm going. So what about this Magician? But if we expand this out to, you know, like a job example, maybe this is just like a bad manager or something, that rather than trying to actually improve the conditions that are leading you to leave, it's like trying to control you into staying. You know, like it's the other side of the coin. And I mean, anything to do with a religious situation, that could be a lot of different things. Let's see what else. Because that's like wanting to halt your progress, those two cards. Death Sideways and Magician Reversed. I'm not clear as to why. Like, why would they want to do that? Oh, there we go. Man, these are, like, the way they are in the deck, they're coming out the opposite way, like when they fall out on the table. That's interesting. So we got a few here. Three of Pentacles in reverse, so this does seem like it's about work. Chariot upright, and Five of Cups reversed. So a lack of cohesion with the Three of Pentacles in reverse. That could be what's driving you forward, you know, the Chariot, what's causing you to seek greener pastures, you know. And there's always that, like, the cliche, the grass is always greener on the other side, yada, 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 you know. I mean, the grass is greener where you water it. But if you've been watering and tilling and whatnot, that's all good and well. But if when you turn your back, someone's salting your soil or pulling up your seeds without your knowledge, nothing's gonna grow there. If you've got a magician in reverse trying to stop your progress and actively going against you and then trying to convince you to stay, like, I don't see the problem. Like, why don't you like it here? Things can stay exactly the same forever. That sounds like literal hell. And then the Five of Cups in reverse, that's going to read a lot more positively than it's upright. That's like moving past the grief of maybe leaving a long time situation. Because even though, you know, if you know something's unhealthy, it could still be hard to leave. We're creatures of habit. You know, our brains like things to stay the same, even if it's bad for us. It prefers familiarity over unknown. Because reasons. Goodness gracious. Let's get a little more detail here. Let's see. Maybe butterscotch coffee is not the most effective thing for my throat. I love those flavored coffees. There we go. Ooh, domination. I don't like this. With the Magician in reverse. And they are, all their bits are covered. Or like wrestling on there. But interesting, there's like religious symbols too. Mars and Sagittarius. Which I think just happened, actually. I think we just had that transit. Huh. But domination, you know, trying to control your movement, trying to control your choices. We might have to get into the next position to really get into the why of things. But I want to know more, like what's this domination about? Because people do what serves them. So if someone's acting a fool, you know, trying to control your movements, trying to control your choices, whatever, how does that benefit them? What do they get out of it? And it absolutely does not need to be rational. That's like the hardest thing about putting yourself in the shoes of people you are not like. If they're doing things that are irrational like that, like trying to control another person, it can be really difficult to try and understand. And you kind of got to get into this abstract thinking of like, what would motivate a person to do this? And sometimes it's just supply, having access to you. You are, yeah, inheritance. Saturn in Scorpio. but you are feeding some sort of need or providing some kind of salve for a psychic wound, you know, from their childhood and something like that. So inheritance. And this is interesting. It's definitely giving me Hecate's wheel, which I'm wearing right now, actually. Huh. But I'm not getting like a monetary inheritance. But 9 to 8, that's interesting. Like a countdown. And the Europe song just started in my head, the final countdown. But this could be like an inherent quality in you. You know, we're talking about somebody trying to get supply from you. I'm talking about like narcissistic supply. So maybe you're naturally empathetic. You know, anybody who is relying on things like performative empathy, if you are authentically empathetic, they might want access to you to learn from you and not necessarily to become a better person. Unfortunately, sometimes it's to become like to sharpen their blade, as it were. Trying to pick up those qualities that you have that they want or they want to emulate, you know, that apply those to the persona, to the mass that they're presenting to the world in a more effective way. Yeah, authority. A lot of Mars cards, actually. Mars in Capricorn. And more, looks like religious iconography. Very Hierophant-y vibes. They actually look pretty similar. I mean, it's not the Pope's crown, you know, that they dropped in the 70s. The 70s? 60s, maybe. But this is also giving me Assassin's Creed. If you've played that, you know, the Apple of Eden, that artifact. So it's a secret. Something that's hidden. But it's like having that jewel, if you will, gives them more authority because they seem more authentic. Huh. That took an interesting turn. Interesting. So they want to seem more authentic. Why? On the right, I'm just going for why. For why, though? Why is this happening? Let's see. Give her a shuffle. For why, though? Not the right question? I'm a little lost. I don't quite understand this manipulativeness. Manipulativeness. Whatever. You get it. Why is this happening? What's the goal? What's the goal? And why are we so quiet now? There we go. Four of Swords in reverse. And the High Priestess in reverse. Oh man, this just gets worse and worse. Um, so trying to interfere with rest, trying to interfere with some sort of recovery, something like that, and trying to block sacred site, essentially. And the keys on this card have always given me Hecate, so doubling up on that symbolism there with the wheel and her key. I'm also wearing a key right now. Huh. But trying to block intuition, insight, keep someone off balance because they're not getting rest. Not quite understanding the connection between... I mean, yes, they want to control... Gonna have to get a little bit more. So I'm trying to put this up against the Ordeal. Because if you think about the Sorcerer's Stone example, he was hiding something the whole time. I mean, that he was a host body, you know, really, for Voldemort. But it was a significant secret. And a secret that needed to be protected so that he could gain strength. Is that, like, what's going on here? That something doesn't want to be seen for that reason so that it can grow stronger roots? Why? Because this feels like this is happening to the Empress. Whoever this represents for you, whether that's you or, you know, somebody else. And the Empress is getting manipulated by the Magician to this end, to interfere with rest, recuperation, and intuition. You too smart for your own good? That's an affliction of mine. People don't seem real keen on my pattern recognition in many instances in my life. Four of Wands in reverse. Disharmony. And the Four of Wands, that's the ceremony of the lovers. Like a wedding, a homecoming, something like that. So in reverse... hiding a connection? Doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. I don't want to introduce any suspicions that aren't already present. You know, these things should be confirmation, not revelatory. And but that could be shady business deals, you know. We're talking about the Nine of Pentacles. That's the significator for the reading. That's at the root of all things here. And I've used that word several times. Root. Root chakra. Root work, maybe? Is someone doing root work on you? That, I mean, really, unless they straight up tell you, or, you know, you catch them in the act, you know, you're not really going to be able to prove that someone is doing hoodoo. And when I say that, I really mean like misusing it. I don't know a lot about that, but that's my inclination, is that it would be a misuse of that. Because, I use the label witch, and I don't get any further than that, but I only cast on myself. I don't cast on other people, because that's like a non-consensual interference with energy, and just the intent behind that, whether you believe or don't, like the intent in someone's heart to cast on another, either without their knowledge or against their will or something like that, that really speaks to their character about, I mean, how spineless they are, that they're unwilling to have a face-to-face confrontation with this person, that they're just trying to manipulate in the shadows. That's really what I'm getting here, is that there's really something manipulative going on. Oh, and I already had 3. I don't know why I went for another. The World. Okay. World in reverse. And this in particular gives me internet vibes, because it's got that, like, world clock, like, map thing. And in reverse, I mean, this would generally be like a cycle that isn't ending. So trying to keep you in place. And I mean, in that structure of the hero's journey, that could just be trying to keep you out of the inner sanctum so they don't have to have a face-to-face confrontation with you, preventative measures than reactive measures. Which, when used for good, that's a wise and prudent methodology. Let's get a little more here, because I want to know, like, why the so much effort into hiding this, and we talked about shady business deals, and this is giving me internet vibes. It might be trying to keep some information private. Because people do not always do the right thing, and I'm not unsympathetic to that. In this economy, I understand how hard it is to make an honest living. That doesn't make it okay, though, to, like, be manipulating people and trying to control other people's lives and stuff like that. And people do not get enough credit for being fully aware of what they're doing. I'm so tired of seeing people just get coddled under these, like, really clear-cut examples of, like, oh, you knew what you were doing was wrong, and then they give some garbage answer of, like, well, I'm still learning, and blah, blah, blah. No, you're not. Show me some evidence that you are, in fact, learning anything. And it's typically the demographic in charge that gets away with that, which just makes me so mad. We've got detachment. Was it Venus in Aquarius? Concentration. That's an interesting card. A little goblin there on the lips. Huh. Saturn in Gemini, and health. Sun in Virgo. Detachment, health, and maybe struggling to focus. So that detachment, because that flipped over when I was talking about, like, it's the dominant demographic that usually gets away with the, like, times are changing, we're still learning, and blah, blah, blah. Whatever, no, you're not. You're just literally, like, giving us lip service here so that you don't actually have to face the consequences of your actions, even though we all saw you. And health, like that's doubling up on the Four of Swords for me, because that came out in reverse. Egypt vibes here. And they're pouring water on her head. That's like a restoration of the crown chakra, of insight and intuition and, those random intuitive hits that you get. I don't know if that ever happens to you, but you just get the random urge to do something that's innocuous, relatively inconsequential, and maybe it turns out good. You went left instead of right, and the gas station you don't normally go to was doing like a free coffee day, something like that. That'll make your whole day. But this energy, this magician in reverse, that's where that detachment energy is coming from. It's like there's a real detachment from them and whom they affect with their actions. And the concentration, this kind of seems, maybe they're a little lost in their process. Because swords, the Ace of Swords, that's truth, clarity. And each of these swords, and there's 7, so deception being seen. But it's also giving me an inability to keep up with your web of lies. Each of these swords is a different lie that needs to be maintained. And it could even be a half-truth. Overt lies are a lot harder to hide than half-truths. Because the best manipulators, they're really going to ground stuff in reality because it has to be believable. It's like maintaining the perceptions, like what I was talking about earlier. Like, no, our family didn't have any level of influence on anything other than, like, our family and, the immediate people around us. But we still fit in this, like, image of everything was great at home, which was so jarring for me as a kid to hear the way people I didn't live with talk about my caregivers. And then I had my experiences and these things didn't match, and I had no safe adult around me to be like, oh, hey, kiddo, this is dissociation. Like, this is cognitive dissonance and gaslighting and whatnot. Like, you are getting complex PTSD right now. Sorry. It's just, that's a lot on a tiny little kiddo brain because they absorb everything. And when things aren't congruent, it creates these, like, faults in your psyche. Complexes, like what we're talking about, things that operate, like, autonomously, independently of your ego I self. But what what's the end goal here? I want to see that. Of the Magician. What's the aim? More sideways cards. Okay, a lot of stuff in motion. We've got the Knight of Wands and the Nine of Wands. And this is, as I picked it up, in reverse. So lack of boundaries. So I'm getting from this, someone is trying to barrel past either your or the Empress's boundaries, whoever that happens to be. Maybe just to maintain control, because that, I mean, boundaries are the antidote to being controlled, you know, because how are they going to control you if they can't even get to you? People will go to great lengths. We've got the Ten of Cups upright. Ew. Is this unrequited love? Does the Magician have a thing for the Empress that is unreciprocated and they're just trying to control the situation by presenting some sort of perception that they are what the Empress wants? That might be why they're trying, over here was talking about trying to pick up on qualities. This might be mirroring, like love bombing. Trying to interfere with sacred sight, with insight, with rest, with recovery. Huh. Take that as a confirmation motorcycle outside. But that very well could be. Because I think I've talked about it on recent readings. People with like antagonistic, narcissistic personalities, whatnot, they're not into you. They're into having access to you, which sucks. That's a tough reckoning to contend with. But once you're able to put yourself, you know, in those shoes and like look at life through that lens, a lot of those nefarious behaviors start to make sense. You know, if I was somebody that cared about nothing more than what can I get from this person? You know, how do I benefit from being with this person? It's very, like, kind of the reason I don't like dating apps. You know, because it takes, like, half the fun out of it. You know, trying to get to know somebody and do that awkward, like, feeling them out dance. And are they single? Are we flirting? Are they into me? Yada, yada, yada. That's the fun part. But apps, it's just like, here's my sleepover application. What do you think? It's very transactional. I really don't like it. And that, it feels like that really emboldens this type of personality because they can just kind of cruise for what check boxes they want. I don't know. That was quick. I'm just going to take 3. So we've got adaptability, Moon in Gemini, another Mars card, revenge, Mars in Scorpio, and resistance, Mercury in Taurus. I think Mercury is either in the microwave or about to be in the microwave. So adaptability, and this one is always giving me Kali vibes. You know, Kali and Shiva. And then Medusa. Heavy, heavy energies. So this is in the to what end? They want revenge? Ugh, is this someone who doesn't deal with rejection well? Be careful. The impact of an ego wound with a narcissist can't be understated. And people who haven't like firsthand experienced things like post separation abuse and whatnot really fail to recognize the severity of it. And generally speaking, it's psychiatrists that fail to recognize the severity of these things. And at least that's my experience. It often gets labeled as like paranoid because many psychiatrists are of the dominant demographic. Like, this is not happening to them on the whole. It's the psychologists, the therapists that are more on the whole women that have greater experience, like firsthand knowledge with these things, that take it more seriously. So if you are in a situation where someone is abusing you in a situation you're trying to get out of, whatnot, please seek some help. I would start with a therapist. I'm not saying don't go to a psychiatrist. I have my own personal feelings about my experiences with them, but talk to someone. Like, get the process started. There's the 988, But they might be resisting just the no. The fact that you are not interested. That took an interesting turn though at the end, like right at the end. It's like unrequited love. And they could be trying to adapt their approach to try and bypass your boundaries, that 9 of Wands. And this could all be leading up to the ordeal. Because that's a conflict. Maybe there is something. This could also, if we really want to get deep into the weeds here, could also not be true unrequited love. That could just be a method to hide whatever this Four of Wands in reverse was. This connection that didn't want to be known, some sort of shady business deal, something like that. Their lies, this Seven of Swords here, not being able to keep up with their web of lies, or maybe they've told a lie that somehow if you return affection, then a lie will become true. It's getting a little out there for me. It feels like a stretch, but overall, it seems like this approach, all of these little traps, booby traps and whatnot that are set up to try and keep something from being revealed in the ordeal. So we'll get a card from the Audacity deck. I think we'll get one of these cards here, the white cards. We'll get you on your way. So the Audacity. Tell us about the audacity of the magician. It's the devil. Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be the devil? The magician in reverse. And this image, they're looking at a mirror. and then seeing that reflection of the skeleton. So that's a perception. Very illusory? One of them? Casting an illusion, as a magician is wont to do. But it's to the end of manipulation. Like, that's what they're trying to achieve. I would say the devil is, on the whole, very audacious. Huh. So, that could be someone dealing with addictions, dealing with some sort of personal devil. Like, that is what is making them do all these weird manipulative things rather than, like, doing the internal work and looking at themselves in the mirror about, like, where is this wound coming from? Like, why do I treat people like this? You know, they would rather continue to manipulate, entrench themselves in their web of lies, as opposed to take accountability, look at themselves, deal with things in an appropriate way. This came out pretty quickly. Hellsing Ultimate. Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good anime. I don't know what streaming service that's on. It's been a little bit since I watched that. But fitting to the Uranus in Gemini that I had mentioned earlier, talking about World War II, things like that. So if you want to see, well, I don't want to spoil it. It's good enough just to watch, because I think the Hellsing Ultimate is the shorter series of the Hellsing series. It's got less filler in it. I really enjoyed it. So a lot to think about. Next one we'll be talking about is the Ordeal. And I think we might have some interesting insights to just see what the heck is going on with this next upcoming stage on the hero's journey. But overall, I hope this helps. I hope this resonates, and if it doesn't, I hope the next one does. Thank you so much.